This week on the Old School RuneScape Update, Yama the Master of Pacts arrives with Oathplate armor, Infernal Shale skilling, and Jim's wet cloth. We discuss the genius behind the reward space, drop rates, and whether or not Torva and Nex are dead. This is the Old School RuneScape Update, episode 75, recorded Sunday, May 18th, 2025. Play early, abuse early. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of OSRS Update. Sirion and myself are here as we are. Well, we'll get to our schedule a bit after, because that's changing. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that.
No, your tagline.
But hey, that's okay. We have an interesting boss to talk about this week. Yama, the Master of Pacts. After what I feel like was much trials and tribulations in the community, he's finally here.
Yeah. It was a little bit of a rocky road.
It was, and we'll talk about that in good time. But of course, if you want to follow along, full show notes can be found over at update.show/OS. We also have our Discord over at update.show/Discord and a friends chat that can be found in-game at BitsBytes. And I think we just get on the road here and begin with the upfront fact here that neither you or myself has the combat levels or gear necessary to take down Yama right now.
No, exactly. This was a real this was a tough show for us to plan. I like being upfront with you guys as listeners. It's sort of fun to take you along on the journey sometimes, even though it does lift the tip of the curtain a bit. We looked into like getting some people on to try and talk about Yama and to go into the mechanics, to talk you through all of it. But ultimately, what we came up with is that, you know, if you want to know about all of this, we're just frankly not the best people to talk about the mechanics. So that's the end of the show. Goodbye. No. There's a good
amount of videos and whatnot out there that detail the movement behind it and the general fight mechanics that you can expect to anticipate. And you know, we're primarily an audio first show at this point, and you know, we're not going to necessarily teach you how to do the boss, but in general, we do want to go through some of the things as we do at OSRS Update that are interesting to us for where we are in game. And I think that's the best way of looking at it.
Yeah. I mean, I did look at some footage from the fight. It does look interesting. I think it's been received quite well. Can't really give, you know, my own personal take, but I do love the little interstages where you, with the callback. I don't know if you've seen any footage of the fight, Shane.
I did.
But like it like the little interval between the stages where you basically have like a short version of the fight you did during Kingdom Divided.
Yeah,
against
exactly.
The Judge of Yama. Love that little callback, and I think that's a great way to break up what is essentially a fairly static fight, because Yama doesn't really move.
No.
So to me, that was really some much necessary sort of dynamic way of going through the fight.
Yeah, and from what I can tell, it's largely movement based, and you know, my past stories on movement based bosses and whatnot. Should I have had the levels and gear for it? So yeah. I mean, with that, there's that aspect of it. But another thing we wanted to touch on was the contracts, and how do you feel about these and what we want to do with this?
Contracts, look, I have my opinions. I think the current discussion about the fact that they've made them solo are probably a little bit overblown. I understand the decision as well, but at the same time, without knowing what the contracts are and whether they could have made a way to make them work, I feel we should leave that until the point that the contracts are actually enabled in a few weeks. So that's, we can actually talk about them in full detail. But
and with that, people are gonna have the boss down to a T at that point, and then they'll be able to.
They already have.
Then they'll be able to look into the contracts and say, expanding difficulty from here. This is what they do, and is this a good mechanic for that going forward? And I think both of us were reading a lot into the contract stuff over the last week.
What was interesting, and I'm curious to hear your opinion on this, is that it used to be that the boss pet was only dropped from a particular contract, and they changed that to give all of the boss kills pet rolls. Their idea was that they wanted a pet that was a little bit more skill based, so you actually had to do like a tougher fight, and it's less grind based. But people were really upset that this essentially GP locks the pet because you need to acquire the contract first. So what is your opinion on that? Do you think that's a positive change?
I think it's good to have it so that the pet is able to come without a contract, if I'm being honest with that, because you look at any other boss in the game, one of the things that people are always going to look to when the boss drop tables get announced, aside from key loot, is what does the pet look like, and what's its name. And I think if you couldn't get the boss pet for 2-3 weeks until after launch, I think that would put a bit of a sour note in people's taste. So I would say it's better to just have the pet available up front.
Yeah. I also think the pets forum, it's almost a community feature, right? To talk about how dry you go on the pet, or how spooned you go on the pet, right? Like, to me, it's a conversation. I can't talk. It's a conversation starter in the community, and as weird as it sounds, I think that's actually a really important feature of the game to continue sort of engagement with the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand the prestige of pets like that. I know I floored everybody when at like 82 farming, I got the farming pet off of a friggin' toadflax herb, and that's a conversation starter itself. So I can see why we like it to be that way.
Yeah. So I am at 97 farming, and I have yet to acquire any pet in this game.
They are quite rare.
Yeah, quite rare, yes. Anyway, this brings us straight into the drop table itself, I guess, with the big highlight being Oathplate. And oh boy, has Oathplate, at least on the aesthetic level, caused a lot of controversy. So what are your I mean, not even just the looks of it, also the fact that it is essentially in power level equal to Torva.
I feel like we, when it comes to these sorts of boss loot experiences like that, you look at first, of course, I'm going to address how it looks first, because myself, I don't really care how the stuff looks that I'm wearing if it's going to be providing a bonus for me. And I think that's one of the things I've learned to accept with OS. It's one of the things I learned to accept with OS over the years, right? So I'll take that. But when it comes to the stat on the Torva side, and in my mind Nex is old, right? But I realize they only when did Nex come to OS? Was that 22 or 23? It was one of those years, 22. I think.
January
22. So it's not as new as, or not as old as it feels like it is, but at the same time, you question, should something like Torva be protected? And I feel like your perspective as whether or not you're proficient at Nex, how you feel about the market, and your current gear situation, that's all going to factor into your opinion on that. And, for me, I feel like Nex is an iconic boss. And the question I think that Jagex needs to answer is that what is the duty of the combat dev team in particular to protect the value of older bosses, older in quotes?
Yeah. Does Torva even come from Nex?
I thought it did.
Okay. Yes. Okay. It does. Yeah. Yes. No. It's sorry. I'm confused with Virtus, which doesn't come from Nex. Virtus comes from the Desert Treasure 2 bosses.
Yeah.
That's different, yeah. All right. Yeah. No. Torva is a tough one, right? Torva, in my opinion, is actually at a. I don't think it's at an unreasonable price point right now. As essentially best in slot gear, the full set. Well, is it? I think it's the best in slot. Yeah, because it has the best strength bonus. It's the best in slot gear, and as a full set, it really only costs like 750 mil, which to me is not an unreasonable price for a set of best in slot armor.
Right, for best in slot.
If you look at Ancestral, that's actually much cheaper. It's only at 335 mil.
Yeah,
full slot or full. The reason that Torva is so expensive is that the grind to get a full set of Torva at Nex is hella long. Right? It's one of the longest grinds in the game.
And I know that because I remember people who chose Asgarnia in both leagues commenting just even with the boosted leagues rates how difficult it was at times to get their Torva pieces. So that kind of speaks to that.
Exactly. And so the question is, now that we have a new piece of content that essentially matches Torva in how strong it is, right? Except for it is more focused on slash, whereas Torva is more of a stab thing. Potato. I don't think it matters that much. I mean, maybe it does, because you have the scythe, of course, in the slash realm, and now we have essentially a piece of armor that buffs the scythe even more. But I still think there will be places where Torva armor outperforms Oathplate.
Yeah, and
especially given how we have so many places where the Fang still outperforms most other weapons because of high defense.
And I was going to say I have two comments on this in particular. The first one is towards that in terms of the various stats, and that is a finer nuance of the OS combat system, is that you can have something that is best in slot, say slash defense or slash attack, and you can preserve that. And then you can bring out something that's best in slot in one of the other ones. They don't need to necessarily be the same. So, in conversely, if this were RS3, I'd say, don't worry about preserving the value of Torva, because Torva can sink into invention. But at the same time, I think the design that we're seeing in terms of the Oathplate versus Torva conversation is very interesting, because I would personally be of the sense that it makes sense to preserve the value of Torva in old school. That's a different way I'd be looking at that based on the combat systems. But at the same time, I think the design we have here for Oathplate in itself is just very interesting in the way that they weaved everything all together.
Yeah, look, I think the main problem is around something that is on the same power level as Torva, but takes essentially a fifth of the time to obtain. They changed it to be more like a fourth of the time. More on that in a second. The fact that this armor is so much more accessible, and people are also calling Yama a much more grindable boss than Nex, which fair enough.
That was the sense I got from the content I watched as well.
At the same time, I don't think that's a bad thing, right? Like, you want grindable bosses that are still interesting and on
that
unique.
note, one thing I'll say in terms of where Yama is located compared to some of the other bosses in game, hello Dagannoth Kings, it's relatively easy to get to the general area first with a fairy ring, and then if you want to come up and bank, you have the Shazen bank area that's relatively close as well, which I think is good as this game doesn't do dedicated, PVM hubs with portals and all that.
Exactly. So, yes, all in all, it's maybe this is the beginning of the end for Torva. It might very well be. I accept that. I do think there is something iconic about Torva that Oathplate really doesn't match and doesn't have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can see the sentiment.
You don't
that,
get more iconic than Nex.
No.
That's what it comes down to, right?
I do think that the full Bandos set is more iconic than the Torva set, but
oh, that's a spicy take.
Is it?
I prefer Torva.
In terms of iconic looking, right? Like,
yeah.
if you were to cosplay in any piece of melee armor, you'd pick Bandos.
I would not.
Because you don't want to have people see your abs, or
no, because there's other. Because I think Torva looks wonderful in game. My personal cosplay armor setup would be Ceratoman Rune. That's beside the point, though.
Oh my goodness! Can you recognize like an early player when you see one?
Hey, it's the first thing I bought when I had money on OS because I could never afford it back in the old days.
Fair enough. Look, I do think that if you compare Oathplate to, say, the Blood Moon set, right, which Blood Moon is the best I can afford and wear right now, but also it is really, really good looking, right? It's a really good looking armor set, and I think all of the Blood Moon sets, Moons of Peril sets are really, really good. So I can see the disappointment with Oathplate. I can see how the fact that is the thing to displace Torva armor of all things. I can see the sentiment around it. But also, Torva, as much as I think that about 740k for a full best in slot set is pretty reasonable.
740k?
Mil.
Okay, just check it.
Sorry, we are recording this in the morning for me as opposed to my evening, and my caffeine hasn't kicked in yet. So.
Yeah, I was not feeling too hot earlier in the day, so we shifted it around.
Yeah. But if you look at Ancestral at only like 350 mil or so, and for the sake of it, let's look at Masori. Where is Masori? Armor, the fortified set is only 180k, right? So if you look at where the melee armor sat in terms of price points, it was too expensive to begin with.
Yeah, and I feel like that discussion itself is one that was worthy to be had, right? And I think we had that when the Moons came out in terms of Blood Moon set competing with Bandos.
Yes, which interestingly, I just checked Bandos. That is only 36 mil for the full set. I feel that used to be that has definitely gone down in the last year or so.
Yeah, but I think what it comes down to at the end of the day is, how do you feel about that, and should the high level best in slot armors be uber expensive? And of course, if you grind the bosses, you're going to say yes because that's where your money comes in. But at the same time, the question is, how do you get people into higher tiered PVM? And you could say, take a tier two down, and you'll be fine. But I feel like there's just so many aspects of nuance here that get lost in passionate community debates, I'll say. Wink, wink.
The big question I suppose people have is that right now, all of the best in slot armor for the other two styles comes from raids, which is much less grindable in a sense.
Yeah.
Because it's a much longer investment, and you don't do multiple runs on a single inventory. So we have Masori, of course, from Tombs of a Mascot, and we have Ancestral from the Chambers of Xeric. Now, of course, we do have the what is it? It's Justiciar, isn't it?
Yeah, Justiciar from Theater of Blood.
Yes, but of course that is tank armor.
Yeah, and the funny bit is that Alex and I actually had a bit of a discussion on that on the episode. You weren't here. I forget what he said he was killing, but it drew someone's question from the comments, and says like, "What the hell? How is this guy able to actually kill whatever this boss was in full Justiciar?" I think it might have been Sire actually when we're talking about Sire.
Yes, right.
Anyways.
So people are maybe we are going from the best in slot strength armor, let's call it that, in melee, was already the standing out style because it didn't come from a raid. It's moving from a boss where it took forever, like a massive grind, to a boss that people are perceiving as actually fairly straightforward, really grindable, and fairly quick to get.
And as somebody who, doesn't do raids and doesn't like the idea of hyper randomized loot, I like this approach.
At the same time, you get a lot of people saying, because they dropped the drop rates, and I think we need to talk about that as well. The fact that it was maybe a little bit too easy to get Oathplate in the first few days after the kill. The grind was, according to Jagger's numbers, about 60 hours compared to Nex, to Torva's 300 hours. So they changed it so it's more around 75 hours.
I think that's a fair compensation.
A lot of people are upset about the fact that it does take that long, and they are saying that 75 hours is an unreasonable.
It's unreasonable
to expect any player to put in the game.
I can't comment on OS bosses, but when it comes to the amount of time that I've sunk into a few of the bosses that I've logged on RS3, I feel like the 75 hours mark is kind of where we land.
Looking at my own account right now, I am well north of 1,000 hours invested in my account. Now, I'm not a very efficient player, but I am not. I mean, I may be early late game, but I'm definitely not an end game character yet. So just to get to the point where you can do Yama, you're probably at least 1,000 hours in, even if you're reasonably efficient. If you're hyper efficient, maybe less, but like if you're reasonably efficient, you're probably at least like 1,000 hours in. 75 hours is a lot, I get that, but we're talking about people who have already invested so much in their account. And if you make all the grinds only 10 hours,
right?
Like I'm looking at getting the reward for mastering mixology, right? Mm-hmm. Right now, I'm getting the reagent pouch, I'm getting the storage, I'm getting the goggles, and I'm getting the amulet.
But that's relatively fixed compared to a boss.
It is, but I just want to talk about the time it will take me to get there. 15 hours. That's already a fifth on the way to going on raid at Yama for a full set of Oathplate, which is an endgame boss with best in slot / strength armor. 75 is not unreasonable.
No.
I think. If you compare it to other grinds, it's not unreasonable. And I get it. I do get it. I get that there are people who don't have more than maybe 6 to 10 hours to spend each week, and they would need to basically commit 2 full months at Yama to get a full set of armor. Yeah, but I don't think that's I don't think the game can.
No, it wouldn't sustain that because
to those people who can only play. I'm gonna say something very spicy and perhaps very controversial.
All right,
but if you are a player that only gets to play 4 or 5 hours a week and you still want to make progression, you should go and play RS3 and just buy your way to progression. Yes, that's pay to win, but if you don't have time, but you do have money because you've worked so much,
that is the classic difference between OS and RS3, right?
Yes.
One of them, at least, for it. And, I just wanted to add in my experience as well from, different MMOs. The Elder Scrolls Online has a dungeon system, and a lot of the dungeons in that game offer what are the best in slot armor pieces for, support or healing. And all you need to do is you just run those, a set amount of times effectively, and then you get the complete log from them, and then you can recraft and rebuild that armor. into something that's useful, and you know how long it's going to take you. So I see where people are coming from when they want it to only take a certain amount of time, but I think we also have to be cognizant of how, just in general, drops and whatnot and the RNG mechanics work and have been expected to work in OS.
Yep. Yeah. So all in all, I think this is the right thing to do from Jagex's side, and to do it at this point is, there's always going to be pushback, right? And the fact that they did this change on Friday, 2 days after the release, gets everybody in this mentality of abuse early, abuse often, right?
We had a quote on one of the RS3 shows: "Use it or abuse it."
Yes. Yeah. And I get that sentiment. I really do. You could argue that maybe Jagex should be overly conservative with the drop rates and then buff them, which is probably the lesser evil, but then nobody is going to do the content on release anymore. So you can never get it right. You can never get it quite right.
Yeah, and I feel like there were also a lot of moving parts with Yama as well that were probably drawing CM's focus.
Yes. Some people also judging Jagex that, they can't even kill their own boss, and we figure out faster strategies like within a day. Yes, you do, because there's countless number of players and only so many Jagex mods.
Would it pain people to know that there are video games out there that have a majority of their players that don't actually play the game, and players, or rather game designers that design in-game content for those games? That might shock a lot of gamers out there, but that's entirely how it works.
Exactly. So I think the fact that the boss feels as good and smooth should give you pause, because that means they did actually play it. It's just also, and I speak from experience, once you are designing a piece of content and you're testing it over and over again, at some point you're going to tunnel vision on playing it the way that you intend. Even though there are other ways, your mind sort of tunnel visions, and you sort of look past the jank. You sort of look past the, what is the word I'm looking for?
Assumptions?
The exploits, right? The potential exploits, you look past them, because that's not the way the boss is supposed to do. And this is not a conscious thing. It's an unconscious thing. So that's why we have external playtesters.
Which they did do for Yama.
Which they did do for Yama. But they get limited time with the boss. There's only so many of them. There's just no way you're going to get all of the strategies out through that process. So I think that's an unfair accusation towards Jagex, that they didn't do the boss well enough. I think, all in all, ripping off the Band-Aid now rather than letting this fester and creating like another situation such as the 1 hour drop from a timer on clue drops, where it's been in the game for so long, that it becomes accepted, and then changing it is much, much harder. So
yeah, exactly.
As much as I would have also liked to benefit from these better drop rates when I had the level, at the same time, people say play it early, abuse early. At the same time, if you are one of the first players to play it, you're also going to be the one that runs into bugs, runs into maybe even losing all of your gear because of a weird glitch, right? Which you would get compensated for, but all of that also severely devalues your experience with the boss in the game. So see that little buff in drop rate as a little early bird bonus thank you for playtesting.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking
I made it worse, right?
Well,
I just told people that players are the playtesters. No, that's not what I meant. No, but I think it's a trade-off, right? It's I don't know.
No, I get what you're
Daggers treated
saying.
well.
And I mean, at least we're not dealing with a situation like when the Elder God Wars dungeon on RS3 came out. The first boss there had an exploit where you could stand under it to avoid an attack, and lo and behold, that became a feature.
Look, but to draw the parallel to the Elder Gods Wars dungeon right now is that came out like a few years ago at this point, and they're now looking at nerfing the drop rates. And I think everybody I spoke to agrees that this is really important for the health of the game.
Oh yeah,
but also there's a certain like the whole anger got sort of directed towards microtransactions, and that entire discussion went off rails. But
which, by the way, if you want to hear
thing.
about that, the wonderful episode title there, MTX is not the problem. This time, a couple of weeks ago on that show, for what Sirion's talking about, we discussed it at length.
So the reason I raised that is that they, of course, RS3 has other factors like MTX that play in, but if you let something be in the game for long enough, it becomes accepted truth, and at that point,
and that's why it was so important to act within hours on this.
So I get it. Some people could have said, they should have left it for at least a week to give everybody a fair chance to benefit from these drop rates. But even then, the longer you let it sit, the more damage you do. And especially a boss tends to be most popular in the first few days and weeks after its release. And that is when you want to limit the damage the most. So Precisely.
But we got a bit of a surprise with Yama. I don't know if they talked about this in any of the posts. Yes. They did. Yes. Okay. But the surprise I was actually kind of referring to here, and we'll get into this, is that Jagex is officially acknowledging 3 ticking here with the Infernal Shale aspect of Yama.
Yep.
Using Jim's wet cloth. The mines can go where they want. The mines can go where they want.
Yeah. This is interesting. So the idea is this is a new approach to bad luck mitigation, which I personally really like, actually. I
just want to say time and time again, I have had my grievances with OS combat, but time and time again, the people who design skilling stuff and who design combat stuff at OS, they know what they're doing. And yes. I am consistently surprised and impressed with what they come out with.
Mm-hmm. So just as a little primer for the people who don't know what we're talking about, besides getting Oathplate pieces, the free armor pieces that drop directly from Yama, you also have a fairly regular drop that is Oathplate shards. So these are just sort of parts of the armor. They drop at 12 at a time. At the time I looked at the numbers, by the way, the Oathplate shards are selling for 420k. So that's a 5 mil drop, and it's about 1 in 16 kills you get it. So that's a pretty good moneymaker, pretty consistent moneymaker as well. And the nice thing is it is much less random in a sense. So it's a much more consistent moneymaker than hoping for that one rare. And even if you only invest like 10 or 20 hours in Yama rather than the 75, you still have a good chance of making sort of consistent money making throughout the way. And maybe you get lucky with a piece, or maybe you don't. But yeah, so you have those, and then you combine them with a skilling component. So you can mine Infernal Shale in the chasm itself. And you can do that in sort of 3 ways. You can free tick it, we can normal mine it, or you can even AFK mine it. And that, of course, gives you different numbers of shale per hour, which you then crush. You then combine it with the Oathplate shards into, I think, now I need to check the entire progress.
And I just want to, while you're doing that, I'll just say, that the difference in the amount of shale you get each and every hour compared to AFK, normal mining, and 3 ticking, it's substantial. So it's entirely, kind of choose your own adventure when you get down there. The benchmark that you were able to provide to us is AFK is about 170. Normally you can expect 620, and 3 ticking 1600.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's substantial.
It is like almost 10 times as much by free ticking, which I think is interesting because we do have free ticking for high XP per hour. We don't really have free ticking when it comes to money making. So I will never do it. I don't like it.
No, I don't like 3 ticking either.
If I were to do something sweaty in the game, I'd much rather do combat and bossing. But for those people who do it and who have had all of the experience doing this in at Fossil Island at the Teaks, here's your moneymaker right now. So yeah, you take 28 of those crushed Infernal Shale, and you combine them with 5 Oathplate shards. You create an Infernal Nugget. This is something I believe you just do at a furnace.
I believe so. And another interesting thing about this is that to make the crushed shale, you actually need to have completed Kingdom Divided for this.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That makes sense.
So that's good.
Then you take the nuggets and you turn 10 of those into an infernal chunk. And then you take 10. Oh, and an infernal chunk you can turn into an infernal plate, and 9 plates turn into a piece of armor. The interesting part that I picked up here is that to go from the nugget to the chunk, you sit at a anvil for 3 seconds. Mm-hmm. But to turn a nugget into a chunk and a chunk into a plate. Oh, sorry. A chunk is then made again at a furnace, and then a plate actually takes 1 to 3 minutes, which is very long.
It was only a matter of time, and I was hoping at some point they would add some kind of smithing activity like this in game. So, I mean, as a primary skiller for myself, I don't have 73 mining or 78 mining yet, nor the 83 smithing. This is actually very, very interesting.
Have you heard of the mining and smithing rework?
That's exactly where I was gonna go. For the OS people unaware, this is how RS3 makes its masterwork armor at 99 smithing.
I mean, let's be honest. The masterwork armor is in itself a multi-hour grind. Speaking of long grinds, that's probably about 10 hours that you put in there, right?
Yeah, around that.
And I don't know if that is with or without mining your own ores, even. So I mined all of my own ores for this as well. So that was a long grind. I think this is interesting. Also, you have to go back from like furnace to anvil to furnace to anvil. All of this makes this process a little bit more involved, but it makes it feel more involved as well. And I think that actually makes for more engaging gameplay, and it also makes it so that it's ever so slightly harder to just sit there and convert all of these things over. It's really,
that's exactly it. It's the right mix between active and passive gameplay for a skill.
You don't
that
want
is not
people to start. Yeah, you don't want people, I think, to start pumping out Oathplate chests like they do in plate bodies right now.
No, exactly not.
So I love this process. I do think that they are making a good call by saying that the plates will become tradable, because right now they're not. So if you're in for a penny, in for a pound, you need to finish a full set of armor piece to get money right now, I think it is a good shout.
It is the right move to make him tradable, because if you decide you're done grinding, you just go to the skilling method.
Yeah. But just to get like a idea of how long you need to sit there mining, just to create a single piece of Oathplate armor, you need 2,520 crushed Infernal Shale and 450 Oathplate shards to make the 9 Infernal Plates necessary. So even if you are free ticking, you're looking at like an hour and 40 minutes or so of pure free ticking just to get the Infernal Shale. And then we're not even talking about the Oathplate shards, which are currently making up most of the cost of these. So if you look at a single Infernal Nugget, like we said, we need 28 Shale, which for current prices are about 83k on the GE. But you also need 5 shards, which go for 2 mil on the GE. So that's still... The Oathplate shards are still sort of the bottleneck. But likely what we'll see happening in the long run when we talk about the market is that these two will probably balance out even more.
Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. And, I would edge it to maybe even the skilling method probably becoming the way, that's easier if the amount of people doing Yama drops down.
Yes.
For it.
So absolute. This is like a genius piece of content. So far it seems to be working. Of course, it doesn't do. It costs even more Oathplate to enter the game. So on that front, it is maybe not a benefit. But at the same time, it does mean that if you are an Iron Man and you are going dry, you are not going dry, right? Like, even the fact that you can probably predict the amount of Oathplate shards you get and how much you need for a full set is you can be pretty precise about how much time it takes you to get the full set. And if there happens to be a actual armor drop on the way, you get lucky. You're just lucky, right? You just shorten the time.
And the best thing,
it's a much more bearable grind, I think, because you know exactly how long it will take.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to say the best thing about this at the end of the day is that they accomplished what I think a lot of people wanted, the ability to get stuff from a boss without going to something like a guaranteed threshold drop or bad luck mitigation.
It is bad luck mitigation, but designed in a way that creates a new skilling money-making method for main. Like, this is something that works for both mains and irons.
Like I said at the start of this segment, I told you I was impressed with this. I might not be able to kill it, but I am impressed.
All right, should we talk about some of the other drops?
Yeah, let's do that. We've been goo gagging for a long time on that. Surge potions. Surge potions restore 25% special attack energy, but can only be drank once every 5 minutes, and you make them with the new demonic tallow that comes from Yama's barrel of demonic tallow.
Yeah, apparently this has been causing a little bit of problem in PvP.
Oh, I can see why.
Yeah, I honestly, I think if I had thought more at the time, I might have voted down this option. Dealing with special attack energy as a resource, I mean, that opens a whole can of worms. No pun intended. It's
That's where we go next.
Yeah. It opens a whole new can of worms, and I don't know if messing with that particular resource as part of a drop table was the right call.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I am not a PvP person. My internal gut says, design for PvE primarily. And when push comes to shove on the polls, I will vote what is best for me in terms of how I see the game from a PvE standpoint or PvM standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, even from a PvM standpoint, like I I understand the underlying idea, right? Oh, it's great if like new metas can be developed out of this, but they will never really be relevant for grindable bosses. Maybe in raids, there's a new meta in raids because they're the 5 minutes. Maybe more relevant, but if you
and I mean a 5-minute
itself,
cooldown is quite substantial, but I still see how that can throw a wrinkle into PvP. I like it. 81 herb lore. The thing that caught my eye was the ether catalyst and the ether runes, and I the other thing that I think they accomplished with this boss that I saw in the content that I consumed is that, well, folks, we finally have a realistic reason for the use of the Arceus spell book, which one of those spells in there can be used with the ether rune, specifically the Ward of Arceus and the Marks of Darkness.
Yeah, it's interesting that we're getting catalytic combo runes now. It makes sense. It's an interesting extension to the current system. I love that it's one of those things that I never really thought about, but it sort of makes sense that they exist, and it creates an interesting new reward space. Of course, and then we got the whole explanation of you need binding necklaces and magic imbue, and I was like, why is that? You don't need that for normal combat runes. Oh, we don't have a soul altar. So, hey, that's an interesting future.
Could the soul altar be on the way at some point?
It might be. It might be. Very interesting, of course. All of this lore around these runes. I think it's a cool little reward. I don't think it's a substantial one.
No, it's not a big.
I wonder how many.
It's not a big one.
No, exactly. I don't think it will severely upset things like Guardians of the Rift metas. I know combination runes are sort of a meta there right now,
which I actually learned yesterday.
It's so did I. I don't think they will change much in terms of the Guardians of the Rift meta. Like you said, they might, especially for people using the Arceus spellbook, they really might be, save you an inventory slot in particular
in
cases.
Your rune pouch.
In your rune pouch, yeah.
Yeah. And then we have the diabolic worms, an alternative sandworms for fishing raw angler fish that are dropped by Yama.
I think this is interesting, right? Because we always talk about skilling and combat as two sides of the same coin, where skilling provides the necessary inputs and resources for PVM to take place. So you need food, you need potions and all of that, and kind of you rely on skillers to bring that into the game, which sucks, especially if you are like an Iron Man and you don't want to have to interrupt your PVM with skilling. So that is why we see most bosses also drop the resources and the requirements to kill that boss. So we have food drops, we have potion drops, and all of that. This, to me, is an interesting way of really going back to creating a cycle. Instead of dropping the supplies you need immediately, it drops a method to get those supplies more quickly.
Right.
And this way, what happens is we're still making sure that you don't have to spend hours and hours of skilling to do like an hour of PVM, but we also keep the value of the skilling itself intact, and we really start creating that feedback loop.
Yeah, and they do that because the bait increases the skilling success chance of catching the angler fish, and when you consume it, your catch occurs a tick earlier. But the benefits come at a cost of reducing anglerfish XP by 33%. And I think game design is best when you have consequences for your decisions that you make with this to do something faster.
Yep.
So overall, I think they hit again.
Like I said,
well done.
It's a fun loop, and I would love for this reward space to be expanded with other places where maybe a consumable that lets you get double herbs from herb patches, or maybe something that makes you get secondaries much faster, right? Like that's another thing we see a lot from boss drops, like the egg sack from Sarachnis, for example, is a great example of, just doing that gets you the red dragon eggs that will make potions for you forever.
Yep, and I'm willing to say that their entire design of this reward space is something that I'm really, really happy with here on this. And I hope we were able to convey a little bit of the skilling side of that from this here. But also when it comes to, just dropping Oathplate, have that discussion and bring all of that forward, whether it be, both in terms of the key drops or, as we're just talking about here, worms and new potions.
Yeah.
So
there's also the Soul Flame Horn. I think we didn't really talk about that one. I have no idea what that will do or won't do for the game. It feels like a massive experiment, and I'm up for it. But oh boy, is it a weird one.
Yeah.
I think I'm happy to leave it at that, because I kind of need to give it time to sit in the game to see if it actually has places where it's useful in the game, to see if that is an experiment that succeeded or not. Yeah,
exactly. Any other final thoughts on Yama or its loot?
No, I think the drop table of Yama is Yama.
Ha 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 ha.
Yum. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I will just say is that the Super Restore and Zamorak mixes are on here. The Barbarian potions. I don't know anybody who has ever used those.
Fascinating choice.
I know. But that pretty much marks the end of the prepared remarks here for this episode of OSRS Update. As I did mention at the top of the show, there is a bit of a scheduling change for the foreseeable future for this show. We are moving to a bi-weekly.
Fortnightly.
Is that what it is? I thought it's bi-weekly.
Yeah, well, bi-weekly is ambiguous. Can either mean twice a week or once every 2 weeks.
Okay, we're doing this once every 2 weeks, except we'll jump in the odd case that there's a big, huge update in one of our off weeks. We'll jump in to cover that when the time warrants that, because there's updates like Yama and whatnot. You don't want it to let it sit too much. You kind of want to get in on that discussion and have that as the community is doing it, as it's in the community's front of mind. So just bear in mind the scheduling change to fortnightly is what it is. Okay.
Yep.
He is the English as a second language person. I am the native speaker here, and I have more problems with the language than he does.
Yeah, what can I say? Talk a language that makes sense, and maybe you can talk it very good.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, of course, if you want the show delivered automatically to you, best way is to subscribe, update.show/OS. We're on all the big podcast listening services out there, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, and more, as well as YouTube at youtube.com/@OSRSupdate. Do give us a like and subscribe. Greatly helps the channel out, helps expand the reach of the show, and share it with a friend and talk to us in the Discord. We don't bite. We like having discussions with all of our listeners. But with that being said, we'll see you next time for another episode of OSRS Update. See you then, everyone. Take care.
Bye.